how do you listen to Palestinians right now in this moment? What are Palestinians teaching us about surviving the end of the world? We've survived the end of the world many times, but we're surviving it again at this level. What does this bring up for you?
Devin, this is, I believe, our second time ever in life to actually be in real time with each other. But I feel like I feel much closer to you because our work feels so deeply aligned with each other. That Devin, I think the first time you came across my world was that you had created this gorgeous curriculum and you were doing beautiful work connecting nature and organizing in Palestine. And I
Mhm.
was like, I want to figure out a way to move that into the world. And then we just kept being in contact with each other. And it was like, I'm going to send some books and you'll take them to Palestine. And
Mhm.
the keffiyeh that I wear is the one that you sent me. And
What?
this, yeah,
Oh,
it's always here with me. But I just feel like we've been weaving with each other across time and
hmm.
space. And I feel, we've connected about love. Like, how does love happen during times like this? And
Yes,
so we've been in touch with each other, and we got to speak. Gosh, I guess it was almost a year ago now that the
that's right.
first time we came on with each other was after the genocide had started, and I my memory of that conversation was mostly just sitting with you and weeping. I feel
That's
like
right. Hmm.
mostly what we did together was grieve, and
Hmm.
um, I was really grateful to be able to have that space and to be with you in that way. Now you've just come back. So you've gone on a journey and I knew you were going on that journey. And when you told me you were going on that journey, it was like, I want to hold some space for you to be able to report back in all kinds of ways. But, I have this platform and I keep trying to figure out what are the ways to use this that could be most
Hmm.
useful for folks being able to actually understand what's happening in so many parts of the world and in so many
That's right.
um, movements and so many perspectives. And I'm really grateful for you taking the time to come on and share with me. I keep learning from Palestinians that it's like to be in protracted struggle, to be in
Hmm.
a struggle that has lasted, your entire lifetime and the lifetimes of
Hmm.
those you loved before you. But
Hmm.
history is actually still very short. It's a very
Yes.
particular thing, right? It feels like this has not even been 100 years, and it has been, and it hasn't been, and it's current,
Hmm.
and it touches into a lot of history.
That's
Um,
right.
but it means that we're not like, oh, this one thing will resolve it. We understand
Hmm.
that there's like so many layers, and part of you going to visit, for me, I'm like, I want to hear what the layers are. So the first
Mm-hmm.
question I'm going to ask you is the one I have been asking, which comes from
Mm-hmm.
Grace Lee Boggs. What time
Mm.
is it on the clock of the universe?
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you for all of that opening to the breathing. Um, Also just revisiting some of our traces of how we
Yeah,
got connected.
yeah,
Um, for thinking about time, uh, time in this moment feels different, almost like when you get close to a black hole, the way time shifts, like the weight of gravity, the right, the weight of the gravity of the moment shifts time right now. And I feel that. I feel the way that um, I don't know the difference between the word time and the word revelation in many ways, right? So I hear you asking what is being revealed.
yeah,
And right, so um, can you see, you're asking, in some ways, you're asking me, and what it means for me to hear, you, Adrian, ask me, what do I see?
yes,
Right?
yeah,
Right. What do I feel? What am I in touch with? And what do I, how, what do I, s- how do I speak about that with you? That's something that um, I want to bring in and reflect on. And, definitely the time of collective grief, a time when our wounds are bringing us together. Like that's why one of the reasons we're here. We follow as you did in our meditation, allowing us to honor the way our heart leads us into this moment. Um, and I was talking about this with my partner Sada Ahmoud, before this call where we were talking together about how desperately we need new strategies for interrupting the genocidal colonial onslaught or project that is in place at this time. And we have gone a full circle around the sun, knowing that,
Yeah.
right? Like even when we were a year ago together,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
I think we were like, we need new strategies, right?
Mhm.
And but what can emerge from from this moment where the purpose of genocide is ongoing destruction? Like nothing new. It's not about generating anything. It's about ending things. So it's like the purpose is to stop emergence. That's like what genocide is. So I don't know. I think this year it wasn't it's in the moment and feeling like even when I was there this summer and now feeling that everything is a shock and nothing is a shock for us as
Yeah.
Palestinians, right? This is not new. Like I'm a diaspora Palestinian, born in the 1980s, right? And then in the 1980s, early 1980s, what were happening? And I was born in the early 1980s. And right then, I mean, the Israel was directly engaged in genocidal violence against Palestinians and Lebanon at the same time. Even like the how colonial and disastrous the U.S. administrations were at the time, they did seem to put a little more pressure on the Zionists to stop, to interrupt. But in many ways, this moment feels like a precursor to a World War III because of the scale, right? And so I'm thinking about how World War II was really a marked the end of European colonies in Africa, in many parts of Asia, right? There was a very clear moment at the ending of World War II. And I think the end, thinking of the revealing, thinking about this war of injustice and how it's mandating the fall, the ending of Zionism, and the ending of U.S. imperialism. We need to work for that, right?
Yeah.
To work for that this is the end of the U.S. involved imperialism in the Middle East and Zionism. It's time for me. I think it's time to say people have don't say it enough. I think that it's the end of Zionism, the end of white supremacy, end of colonialism, right?
Yeah, I really appreciate you tying it together because I do keep feeling this like, oh, this is a bigger moment where it feels like, there's been very specific pivots over the course of this
Mhm.
year, right? Where initially it was like we need a ceasefire, immediate ceasefire. Then watching people be able to get behind that and be like, okay, like I may not understand everything, but yeah, ceasefire. And then the education to bring those folks to be like, if you can see a ceasefire is necessary, can you understand that actually this background, this history that we have here actually leads
Mhm.
us to needing an end of the occupation. We need the end of Zionism, right? It's like
Yes,
drawing people along and being like, it also points back to the US at all times, right?
yes,
Because
exactly.
the US is also a settler colonial project that
Hmm.
has constantly been wounded and was founded into genocide and war,
That's
and
right.
then is trying to control the rest of the globe from
That's
this
right.
perspective.
Hmm.
So I really appreciate you like spinning it out to this level. And I keep
Hmm.
thinking about this question of World War III because it feels like in some way if you allow a certain level of violence to happen all the time, then you don't even need to create one war. Like I'm like, for some people, if some people are always at war, if some people are always having
Hmm.
to live in those conditions, in some ways we're already in that. And
Hmm.
so trying to get folks to look around and be like, what are you willing to change? What are you willing
Hmm.
to let
Hmm.
go of?
Yes.
Yesterday I had a beautiful conversation with someone who's based in Asheville who was talking about what what are you willing to lose, because loss
Hmm.
is a huge part of what's going to take to actually move out of
Yes.
um,
Yes.
this condition. And it's like, are you willing to let go of some of these ideas, including, you know, what are real interventions versus false solutions? Oh, is a false solution that Zionism can just continue, but just be held in or contained? Like so much
Yeah.
of what I feel like we've watched
No.
is like it's spinning
Mm-mm.
the other way. Like it's not interested in
Yes,
being contained, it's not interested in being in right
that's right.
relationship to anything around it. When something goes to that degree, it's like, oh, it's becoming pure destruction.
Yeah, and I think, what when you're talking about what are you willing to lose, one of the things I hear in that is, or I think is important to recognize in that is to lose. Sometimes that means people need to be willing to lose themselves, right? So much of the subjectivity that upholds Zionism and white supremacy will makes people crumble when you challenge it, right? So the time that this is a time of ending Zionism, and which means, but that doesn't mean end the people
Mm-hmm.
who practice Zionism, right? That is very important, very clear, and it doesn't mean end the people who practice colonialism, but it means it means ending the practices, the violent, social, political, even affective, even how people respond emotionally, even the
Yes.
psychological and cognitive structures of Zionism and colonialism and white supremacy. So that's what we need to end, which can feel like to a person that they no longer know themselves, right? But the person is more. So we have to push people to make to focus on that, to focus on the collective action that will end Zionism and white supremacy, which is a psychological, affective, cognitive, political project, um, and it has to be done. It's like, yeah,
I've been touring around talking. I released this book, Loving Corrections, and like that's been one of the
hmm
biggest things I keep saying is like
mm,
we have these ideas that function as prisons for us, and it's like how do we break ourselves out of those prisons and recognize that like after we break ourselves out, then we have to turn around and help everyone else come out of those
hmm
ideas. And
hmm
I grew up in
hmm
Germany. Most of my childhood was in Germany, and it was like growing up looking around at people who all of their families had been involved in the Nazi project, right? In some
mm,
way, had been in relationship to it, their grandmother, their grandfather. It wasn't that long ago, and it was still very
yes,
present. And it's like, and people continue, and we talk to people in South
hmm
Africa, people in former Yugoslavia, people
hmm
in
hmm
Rwanda, people in places where genocide has taken place and where these ideas that are fueled by hate and destruction have taken
hmm
over. And what does it take to come through? And I think sometimes we survive, but we don't actually break with the idea. And it feels like if this is a moment where we actually can break with the idea, I'm really
mm,
curious from your vantage point, like what does that actually look like in practice? Like
yeah.
to be like, okay, we're not just we're not just letting it go back to quietness, it's
Mm.
actually like we have to let it go completely.
I think, yeah, so part of that, that's a really powerful question. We can talk. I feel like it's important to talk a long time about that, and we have limited time. But so I want to just respect it because it goes back to like almost a interrupting the way that grief is thrown across people, across bodies and generations. And it's also this way of having to contend with the depth of the loss. The depth, like the what's happening is deeper than the context, right? So we have to, and we can't grieve if we're not in touch with the depth of the loss, the depth of the pain and anguish. So part of it is we have to have the courage and the strength to come together in ways where we can see the I'll say the vileness again of the backing of the USA, of Israel, of Europe, of like burning refugees in hospitals, like Shaban Ahmed, right? Allah yarhamu, he's been burned alive in bed by a fire that was sent by here in the US, right? So we have to like, yeah, so we have to believe that the ending of Israeli and US imperialism and ending Zionism is something that we sidestep too much to even say because white people, Zionists lose their minds, and we have to be willing to let people lose their minds. Even though when I was raised in the diaspora, when I was growing up here, we built just like so much of my life has been trying to rebuild my love bonds and family bonds in Philistine from afar, which is one of the reasons I went this summer and I try to go every summer. But like so many Palestinians, this war of liberation reveals the genocidal impulse, which was so obvious to us and has always been obvious to us. And that's it's so it also feels like part of this is we need to contend with the gaslighting. It feels like we've been so gaslit for so long,
Yeah.
right where um, I would say it's so that for 70 years now,
Mm.
70 years at least. Um, and I want to mention this piece about the gaslighting, right? And the losing your mind
Yeah.
piece a little more.
Yeah. I
Um,
want to hear more.
okay, so I remember, from when I was a kid in California growing up, the ways, we were even in school contending with the Palestinian as terrorist thing, right? And
Yeah.
then what happens when we resist that, even speak up about that? Thinking about even recently, I was giving a talk to in a friend's class at a university in California, a Black feminist course, and I was showing a picture of my grandfather and just telling his story,
Yeah.
and again, one of the students lost their mind, started calling the provost, and he had been shot 11 times by settlers, and so I was just telling his story and realized that he was danger. He was a threat even in his death, you know, and that he left Palestine in his 30s before he was displaced and moved to Chile. And so just thinking about his image in his death, Jamil Atallah, Allah yarhamu, my grandfather, you know, his corporal presence, the image of his presence was enough to make this student and her family lose their minds, right? So this was before October 7th. We knew that the US and Israel were genocidal and I'll say it again, lose their minds. Any kind of challenge or resistance we would bring in the presence of our bodies was so threatening. And it's been almost 100 years of this, right? So as we reach out, as we organize, as folks are supporting the solidarity, how do we are so often gaslit as anti-Semitic, as invisibilized, criminalized, sometimes even by like-minded people of color, sometimes even by indigenous people who are Zionists, right? And it come complicit in the conquest. So, and I'm saying it's not to shame people, but to remind us that Palestinian perspectives have had clarity for a long time. So people are like, why? What's happening to the world? This is so painful to watch. Like, we've been here. We knew this was coming. Do we have to be burned? What does it mean to the Palestinian body that we have to be burned alive? We have to be evaporated in air, to be disappeared into smoke and ash, to be seen, right?
Yeah.
So what does it mean to our bodies that we have to be starved, stuck with polio, babies born to pieces, blown to pieces?
Even when people see that, it's still not enough to be like, and now that must stop immediately without any
Exactly.
like that has been so shocking to me that there's people
Yes.
see that and they're like, oh, that's hard, but and it's like, but what? Like what
Yeah.
with anyone else, if you saw that with anyone else, if you saw that with someone that you could because that's the piece is you have to then say, if that's not enough to say immediately that has to stop, then you don't
Hmm.
see that person's humanity.
That's right. You don't see a person's humanity. And there's also like the stacking of it or the layers that are important. Like the scale is so critical with genocide, with what's happening. I was talking with a colleague in Gaza recently about this question of um, of how and their organization, they always had to say that what they were doing was supporting women's rights in some way or another. And right now, like there's no showers, right? There for people in Gaza, like what that means for women's health, right? There's one of the mothers in the organization. There was an issue also around babies without diapers, talking about like what that's like in a small tent situation, going over and over again, all the ways that women's health are impacted, birthing in this moment. And of course, my partner, Sarah Ahmoud, the feminist collective, talk a lot about this, right? About how we've long organized and articulated how colonial feminisms connect to the genocidal domination, right? So it's time to move as activists and organizers listening to allies who've been working on this for decades, where all of the solutions and you won't get funding without this, or we're not going to move on this if it's like so much of it is so stripped from the clarity we have as Palestinians and our people, especially on the ground in Gaza and others like Tulkaram, Jenin, sites of the colonial violence are very critically aware of.
When you went, is there anything in particular that
Hmm.
you're like, these feel like the important stories that I want folks to hear from the journey that I took there, like what it was like to be able to go be with people.
Yeah, I got back in August and it feels so long ago. I'm like, I kind of want to share about a conversation this morning because I'm a therapist, I'm a healer, and I was working with one of the people that I'm like privileged to be accompanying in this moment, who's from Gaza. They lived for many of the months of the genocide were able to get out in the spring and are in Cairo right now. And there's so many issues in Cairo, even being Palestinian in Cairo, right? But I meet with them every week, and one of the things we were talking about, just protecting their privacy, of course. But one of the things, and they gave me permission to speak about this today. But
Great.
one of the things that they spoke about, what we were talking about this morning, um, was just about how when they left their home in Gaza City, because right where we are now in this journey around the sun, about a year ago, many people were starting to, in Gaza, were starting to, of course, having been killed and bombed and massacred, but also the displacement was beginning on massive scales. Um, right? And so the person was talking to me about, I'm in the middle of a circle and surrounded by all these emotions, right? Circling the sun after a year, but also the circle of emotions are entrapping me, the rage, the pain, the grief, and just trying to move forward, but stuck in the same place. And that, I said, I can't think about the past because the past is still present, that this was the day when my family left Gaza City a year ago and reliving the moment of leaving the house. Um, and I remember feeling for the first time what heartache is, right? And this piece really, I think, is important because we talked a lot about today about heartbreak and heartache and despair and how people in Gaza have been living for a full year within conditions that are designed to actually destroy hearts, right? Are conditions that
Yeah.
spiritually are designed to make it so that people literally can't live and people literally have no options. That this can't be real life, and what the feeling what she was describing was that it's like you have a rock tied to your leg collectively and thrown into the ocean, right? And the world watching and supporting, right? And just sinking and collectively drowning. And so talking about just that also talking um, about suicide, right? About the end, right? And the difference between the end of life and death, right? Because death is part of life. Death is what livingness does. Um,
Yeah.
right? So we all bodies do death,
Yeah.
right? And we do that as part of life, but
Yeah.
that's very different than the end of life. And I think that brings me to a question for you, Adrian, which, ask someone who thinks with end of life or end of world from,
Yeah.
sometimes often rooted in Black feminist queer traditions.
Yeah.
How are you reading? What how do you read, like, how do you listen to Palestinians right now in this moment, right?
Yeah.
Who have, what are Palestinians teaching us about surviving the end of the world? We've survived the end of the world many times, but we're surviving it again at this level. What does this bring up for you?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think a lot of things. I think one of
Mhm.
the things has been, it's really shaken my sense that I gave up on the idea that someone's coming to save us a long time ago, right? That there's
Mhm.
like, oh, there's some moral authority that's just going to come intervene and like gather us, right? I think part of why I wrote Emergent Strategy was because I was like, I don't believe that those systems are going to save us. In fact, I think they're going to collapse. And we need to
Mm,
be ready for that collapsing moment, whatever those collapsing moments are, because we're going to have to take care of each other. I think that the thing I've been learning in this moment is it's really unclear for me how to take care of each other across some of the boundaries that we're in and across some of the ways our identities have been pit against each other. So a lot of what
mm,
I've been listening for is like, oh, Palestinians have multiple perspectives on this moment. Oh, some
mm, mm,
Palestinians are on the ground. Like I was really surprised, I'll say,
mm,
that there
mm,
was an uncommitted movement and that there were Palestinian Democrats who were like, okay,
mm,
we're in
mm.
this space. I was like,
Yes.
okay, let me hear that. And then let me also hear that there are folks on the ground who are like, who understand, the biggest thing for me is always like, do you understand the connection that is that the US and Israel are working in this together? And then
That's right.
what
Yeah.
we're going to have to let go of, what is it that we're going to have to let go of? I feel like I've been learning this piece around land. So I've been looking
Mm,
around and being like, what is my relationship to the land that I'm on? And what can I learn from Palestinians about a dedication to land and loving
mm,
land and like being like, oh, do you love like what land do you love the way Palestinians love Palestine? And what are you willing
mm,
to do
mm.
in that love of that
Yes.
land? Right. So that's been a huge one for me is that I'm like, oh, like I grew up displaced. I grew up inside of that military establishment that was moving, 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 right? I
Hmm.
feel like I was like, oh, it's not enough for me to just have this theoretical concept of relationship to land. Like I actually have to get physical. I have to get
Hmm.
willing to fight for it. Yeah, and mostly that I just want to be in community with, right? That I'm like, oh, like I come from a displaced people. I come from a displaced people who have been told that we could find some kind of freedom in this place that has never come, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, right, what it means to be Black in the US is,
Hmm.
um, I think for everyone, it's just like there's not freedom. We're not freedom.
Hmm.
I think that's one of
Hmm.
the biggest lessons this past year has been turning to all these people that I think of as really powerful and
Hmm.
hearing them tell me why they can't speak up, why they can't take a stand, why their organization can't do
Hmm.
something, all these things, and just being like,
Yeah.
oh, like there's there's all these relative relationships to freedom, but very few people I know actually experience freedom,
Hmm.
experience safety, experience those things. So
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, a lot of what I've been doing is just listening and
Hmm.
then showing up as I can. I think one of the other pieces has been the dedication to life. So like the Palestinians who are in my life, who are
That's right.
friends of mine, who are in my life, it's like there's this dedication to like no matter what else is happening, we are uplifting life. We are, I mean, so many of the Palestinians I know this year, like we're falling in love, we are having kids, we
Hmm.
are,
Hmm.
making these moves. And I'm like, wow, like what does my heart need to learn about this? Because
Hmm.
right, I look at this
Hmm.
moment, I'm like, oh, how are these things possible? And then I'm like, I'm learning from Palestinians how these
That's
things are
right.
possible. But yeah, I do think that there's something about moving through crisis or moving up against a power that is actually bigger. And that's been really humbling for me. Like looking
Hmm.
at Palestinians and being like, this isn't a matter of manifestation, right? It's like we can just manifest our way to a different situation here. It's like we
Hmm.
really are this small force with no army and with no protection. And here's what's happening. And somehow
Hmm.
that we're still alive, we're still going. And I'm like, there's something that we're learning about strategy here that
Hmm.
I'm really trying to sit with and be like, oh, how does something, a people that feel so much smaller and have so much fewer resources, galvanize the entire globe to understand what's happening? That's been very powerful to me and very humbling and very like, yeah. So those are some of the places.
Thank you, Adrian. You know, so one of the things that is hard to see in what you shared, right?
Yeah.
From is how much the way that the realm or the space of emotions in the
Yeah.
body is so critical. So for what I mean by that is, um, I'll go to I'll go to something that this was yesterday. I was talking with a therapist in Palestine who's a colleague, a dear friend. Shout out to Nihaya Abu Rayyan. She's amazing. And she's a healer in Palestine. And we talk regularly, try to talk every week, just supporting each other on different people that we're healing. And one of the things that we were talking about is how we are starting to see the Palestinian body differently, and how how the body is, of course, land. Our bodies is Palestinian land, and at the same time, how our bodies is life, and Palestinian life, and the way in which it's talked about, in the news constantly as um, tabakharat, or bodies that are evaporated, or ashla, bodies that are blown to pieces or shredded, or momasaka, which is torn, bodies that are torn, or the ways that the Palestinian body is, and of course we leaders in our thought, revolutionary love, and scholar practice like Nadra Shalhoub-Kevorkian, who's an incredible thinker and scholar in our community, has been really looking closely at Eshla, which is a body in shreds, shredded to pieces, right? And what are we listening when we read Palestinian bodies, even bodies withheld, frozen by the Israelis, right? Who steal bodies. The families often have to fight to get them back. So the targeting of the multiplicity of what is happening to the horror in our waged against us. How to even our ability to grieve, to mourn, keeping our dead captive, right? Withholding the deceased of a Palestinian body. Also Randa Wahbe and other Palestinian scholars talk about this broader necropolitical regime, right? And it's important. One of the things that I was talking about with Nihaya yesterday about it was how in Islam the dead need to be honored. Honoring the dead is purifying them. So the Honorable Prophet Muhammad spoke about this, saying we look for any kind of piece of the body to honor them, right? So how do we what is the collecting of the body, the collective body and the collecting of the body, right? So the finding the pieces of shreds of Palestinian bodies, putting together, it asks so many questions. What does it mean for us as Palestinians to contend with the body this way? So what do we know? What do we know each other with or through when we're so blown to pieces, right? And the people in Gaza are teaching us so much in this moment about the focus on bringing body back together, bringing collective body back together. Um, Even when the body is decomposed under the rubble, not easy to find, right? But looking for signs of life, of colors of underwear, bracelets people wore, right? The find ways that to say, who does the body belong to? Investigating, searching for life, and searching for relation, right? Because we already know who the murderer is. So we're not investigating, looking for, like at a crime scene, investigating who the criminal is. We know who the criminal is. We're searching for life. We're searching not for a victim. We're searching for an understanding of, um, you know, what is the context that is deeper than all of what is happening to all of us. We're at the front line of trying to dive into the meaning of the body in this context. So I think that's something that is why our hearts are so critical, right? Because when we grieve, if we can't be in touch with the depth of the loss or the depth of the injustice, right? How do we begin our battle for justice, right? We have to be ready to love and put ourselves back together to purify that. That's that spiritual piece, right? We have to be ready to purify every single moment. And what Nihai and I were talking about, there's someone she follows and likes on social media who said that, in this context for Palestinians, that our emotions are our prayers, our emotions are our prayers, that we need to feel the pain of our siblings right now and of our people, because
Yeah.
that is a liberatory practice that is undying, right? We have the ability to resist when we have the ability to feel our emotions. And you talk a lot about this in your work, right? And how you approach things, the centrality of feeling. I think and that's why I was drawn to you, I think from the beginning,
Yeah, I think that's
you
been a
know?
big connector in our work. And
Hmm.
I think it's been a big part of this past year for me has
Hmm.
been trying to balance, very early on, some of the first conversations I had with Lara and with Hala were like about the
Hmm.
importance of witness, of being like, you need to
Hmm.
witness what's happening to the
Yes.
Palestinian body. And already that was such a turn on its head, because being being raised in the US, the story that we are told about Palestinians is the terrorism story, is the,
Hmm.
random bombing story, trying to come back. I remember the first time, you know, back before 9/11, I remember starting to have these questions. So like, well, why would that happen? Why would someone do that with their sacred body, that they only get one body? And why would
Yes.
they do
Yes.
that? And
Hmm.
if you pull that thread, it leads to resistance and genocide.
Hmm.
And it leads to
Hmm.
like someone's trying to, Worcestershire has that beautiful poem where it's like nobody puts their children into a boat in the middle of the sea if home
Hmm.
is safe. It's like you don't put your body
Hmm.
into danger unless your
That's
body's
right.
already in danger and
Hmm.
that you feel that this danger could give you some safety or some freedom.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so then bearing witness is like, okay, I'm already as a taxpayer here in the US responsible to these bodies. Like
Yes. Yes.
I'm
Yes.
already in relationship to these bodies. And so the least I can do is witness and feel, and then
Hmm.
act. For me, it's always like I need to feel the emotion, but also
Hmm.
harness the emotion to move me into action and
That's right.
to figure out like what is the most effective action, that comes from watching someone reaching up through fire and being like, okay, can that be the strategy? Can that be the direction? Like that
Hmm.
person is reaching up, they're still reaching for life.
Hmm.
Like, how do we keep moving it? And how do we look at that body as a teaching body? The
Yes.
children's
And
bodies as
yes.
teaching bodies, right? I'm like, this is a child who was playing in
Hmm.
roller skates. And
Hmm.
how do we process that we're witnessing this? And then for me, I think the big thing is like, how do I not get frozen? Because it's
Hmm.
very possible for me to sit and be like, not even frozen, but just like, not even frozen, drowned. How do I not just
Hmm.
become so underwater that by everything that I can't do something? Because I feel like that's the kind of privilege that I get most angry of and also most scared
Hmm.
that I could become part of, right? Is where I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm feeling it, I'm with you,
Hmm.
I'm feeling it. Thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers. And I'm like, no,
Yes.
like I have to also turn that into I'm responsible. Like when you talked about the weight, the
Hmm.
tying a rock and throwing it
Yeah.
into the water, pulling people down. I'm like, if someone in my name is tying those rocks onto people, then I have to be pulling those threads. I have to be
That's
cutting
right.
those threads. I have to figure that
Hmm.
out. And
Hmm.
I think it's been a really, to me, it's been this quandary of like, okay, so how do we get in right relationship between the bodies of people in Palestine, the diasporic bodies
Hmm.
of Palestinians, and then the bodies of all the rest of us who are like, we don't agree with, condone, want, or desire
Hmm.
any of this, but our government has been moving against us. And
Hmm.
um and moving against us violently, like
Hmm.
being like, I hear that all of eight, the majority of this country doesn't want this. I don't care at all. I don't give a fuck. Shut down everything.
Hmm.
So
Yes.
I'm like, okay, so then I feel enraged and I'm like, burn
Yes.
it all down, fuck this whole
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
And
That's
then
right.
again, I keep having to come back to, okay, what is most helpful for Palestinians? And maybe that
Hmm.
leads into the
Hmm.
next question I keep
Hmm.
asking. I've been asking everyone who comes on here is what is right action, right?
Hmm.
Because I I identify as a post-nationalist. Like I'm like, I
Hmm.
think the US experiment
Hmm.
never worked and has already failed and there's no dream. I'm already beyond that way of thinking. I don't
Hmm.
think in
Hmm.
borders, but I still live
Yes.
in a world that is bordered and where people
Hmm.
look to these processes as legitimate processes. And so I keep asking people what is right action, and I'm curious what you would say.
I would go back to what I was talking today about with, my person.
Yeah.
living in Cairo from Gaza, and how one of the things that they said that stood out to me was um, just fighting the despair and really one of the things they said was that we were talking through issues of suicide, wanting to die, about despair, and moving and wanting to live, to like wanting to live to taste the end of the war. That's what they said directly. Like, I want to live to taste the true flavor of life, you know, and how many of the our people in Gaza right now, and Shanin and Tulkaram and so many other places are working every day to not give up,
Yeah.
right? Knowing that actually one of the things is that, you know, a colleague I was talking about from Gaza was speaking how feeling that they were feeling that something really intense was coming in terms of really intense, that there's a bigger thing coming actually,
Yeah.
right?
I
And
really
that
got this feeling as
yeah,
well.
like that, just like this energy, the body, maybe it's just the body processing, but there was something like, no, like it's about something bigger is coming, that where this feels like the end of hope, even itself. And the way that, how do we, so taste, trying to fight for, and I say this from my positionality too, as a healer. Like, I'm not, there's strategic action to take. And I lean on organizers and activists in that way, at that level, to really help guide that. Like some,
Yeah.
but from my what I can offer, I would say, and what I'm involved in offering as I do my work, and even in my conversation with Dr. Yasser Abu Jama, who was the director of the Gaza Community Mental Health Program, he's an incredible inspiration. And we were talking on the phone last week about this. And, I was telling him I was going to talk in a public setting. And he was like, make sure, please remind everybody that they do not despair, that we cannot give up. This is what the colonizer wants. This is what the
Yeah.
Zionists are investing in. And that we leave our lands, that we give up, leave Gaza, leave the West Bank, leave southern Lebanon, leave Jerusalem, and so on, right? But we refuse to
Yeah.
give up. We refuse to fall victim of despair, right? And that part of it, like I remember how the word trauma is in Greek is like the word defeat is like defeat, right? So
Yeah.
like we refuse that defeat. We refuse to lose hope and expect that everyone supporting us as Palestinians will also defend their own ground, defend their inner ground, right? So I think what Dr. Yasser is reminding us is that our responsibility is to stay involved, to take action, to find ways to resist despair. You know, watching the constant horror can really do that, right? It can make dread feel like it's important to retreat into isolation, to become bitter, to lose hope,
Yeah.
right? But to feel alienated not only from, I think that it feels very clear, the design of the colonizers, to make us feel not only alienated from our lands through displacement, but alienated from ourself and from
Yeah.
our own heart through the waging of the continual loss. Like, the design is for us to get lost in our loss, right? And that's the colonizer's central aim. That's what the Zionists want. So we resist that by finding ways to resist that type of annihilation, right? You don't
Yeah.
kicking us off our land, displacing people from our homes, but the goal is to displace us from ourselves, and that's not going to happen,
That's right.
right? You're not gonna make us feel out of touch with ourselves. We're gonna do
Yeah.
the work to get in touch with our inner ground, and to fight the perpetual psychological torture, right? That's part of the colonial project, is to create a psychological landscape of torture that has no boundaries, right? So
Yeah.
there's no walls for that.
Yeah. I really appreciate this because I think this that like I was trained as a strategist. I grew up, my
Hmm.
father is a strategist. I was trained as a
Hmm.
strategist. I went into organizing and I was always facilitating from a like, what is the most strategic place? At the same time, there's this whole divine part of me that feels connected to something other than that, that is about healing and that is about being in touch with my ancestors
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
the mycelial network of something larger than myself and larger than my
Yes.
brain can figure out, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's been this feeling that it's like, oh, there's a strategic there's something strategic about leaning into that spiritual work and that spiritual connection and remaining steadfast in it.
Hmm.
And it's like,
Hmm.
oh, and this is part of what I mean of, you know, moving out of outside of the cycles that power gives us, that
Hmm.
those elite in power tell us this is the cycle that matters,
Hmm.
and tying into something larger that's like, no, there's a larger cycle that actually matters much more.
Hmm.
And usually that's movement's cycle. For me, I often feel like the human spirit at the largest collective level moves in these massive movement moments where I look at the
Hmm.
globe and I'm like,
Hmm.
this,
Hmm.
you know, I've been traveling. When I traveled outside the US earlier this year, it's like, this is the most I've ever seen in my lifetime of support for Palestinian
Hmm.
existence and
That's right.
understanding. Like people are like, I get the whole
Hmm.
thing, right? And
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's strategy or if that's spirit or what that is, but I'm like, then that's worth fighting for, and that's
Hmm.
worth continuing to fight for, and then continuing to tie those fights into our own struggles. You know, I keep telling people like,
Hmm.
we have a um, there's indigenous people wherever we live. There's indigenous
Yes,
leaders
yes.
moving strategies wherever we live, and there's ways that like our support needs to be, you know, I'm like right now trying to, I'm like flowing my support to Palestine in
Mm,
material ways, in spiritual
mm,
ways, uplifting ways,
mm.
and also figuring out what that looks like here. What does it mean to
Yes,
reorient here to like, who owns this land that I'm on, even though
that's
technically I
right.
have this home ownership deed? How do I, what does it mean for me to give that back to the indigenous peoples of this land? What does it look like in
That's right.
practice to become part of material decolonization in the US? You know,
Mm-hmm.
that was part of what happened. I did a driving tour of the South, and I was like, this has got to be my Palestine. This is where my people
Mm,
are
mm-hmm.
from, as much as we know. This is where my ancestors' blood is in the land, and they fought here and they grew
Yes.
things here, and this is what they love, and this is where they've chosen to
Mm,
be. And can I fall in love with this land? Because I've always been like, I love the whole earth. I really do. And I need to like, I've been letting myself root into a place and fall in love with a place and fall in love with the
mm-hmm.
beauty and fall in love with the
Mm-hmm.
cycles
Yes.
of nature here. And in some ways, I
Mm,
believe that, you know, I think one of the things we're going to have to lose at some point is our global connectedness
mm,
at the internet level, right? Like
mm.
I feel like every time, you know, I was like, when I found out you weren't even on Instagram, I appreciate you coming,
Yeah.
getting in the car and
Yeah. I
taking
was like,
time to talk with me, because I was like, there's just, this is where my
yo,
people come watch
yes,
me.
that
But
that's an
there's so,
act of love, okay,
um,
Adrian?
but I love that. I was like, you're not even on this. Like, you're freer than
No.
I am, you know. But I think that there's a way that some of these, all of these social media platforms that we're using for all this technology, this conversation right now, they don't belong to us. They belong to people who
Mm,
don't want us to be connecting with each other and succeeding at
mm, mm,
building these global movements, right? So I think we'll have to figure out other ways to network, to interweb, to be in connection with each other. But I also know that when that doesn't happen, that I can be in touch with you spiritually. Like I can be in touch, you know, like I'm like, if I'm
mm,
rooting into the land and I'm
mm-hmm.
doing right by the land where I am, that like that thread will make its way to you. And if you're,
That's
you know,
right.
if you are free and you're, because I think that's been a big part
And
of
we,
this, Devin.
and, and we can't forget that our land is body and our body is land.
Land is body and our bodies are us, right? And I'm
Yes,
like,
yes.
oh, like wherever we are, we're carrying liberation with us. We're carrying these
That's
ideas
right.
with us. And everyone we meet, we have to tell them, like, we have to give it as much as we can to them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But there's something, I don't know, there's just been something where I keep wanting to take off the imperial, uh, there's this imperial shaping that's like, well, what do you think needs to happen over there? One state solution, two state
Oh,
solution,
yes.
this. And I'm like, I am not, I don't take that on. Why would I have anything to tell you about what you need
I
to do
mean,
with your land?
exactly.
Why would I say that,
And
right?
what,
But
especially when
everyone thinks that they can go around doing
yeah,
that to me, and
especially
that's
when what
like
happened, especially when what's needed over there is what's needed right here,
everywhere.
which
And
is
it's like what we need
liberation.
to do is let
So
people be
let's be
liberated
focused.
and
Yeah,
have autonomy to live in sovereign ways on the land that they care for and steward, right?
that part.
And like that's a global
Yeah.
need. And so one of the first things I wrote was that the whole earth breaks on the shore of Gaza, right?
Mm,
And
yes.
that for me was like, this is what we're talking about. It's like for me, Palestine is a key that
I love
unlocks
that.
liberation for everyone,
Hmm.
right? Like how we orient towards this moment and what we learn about our own relationship to land and each other. That's I just keep thinking that. I'm just like I'm learning that, right? I think we are
Mm.
all learning that together. I wanted to ask you, I know we're now coming right at 4 and
Yes.
but I wanted you're a poet and you're an
Hmm.
incredible poet and you're also a lover with an incredible love story. And so
Hmm.
I wondered maybe if with this last like 5 minutes, if you could
Mm.
just plant a seed of love for us, tell us a little bit about
Mm.
love. And
Yeah.
then if you have a poem to share with us to close us out.
I don't know where to start, Adrian. I think that um, I want to connect it to grief
Yes.
because in what love has done for me in this moment, this year, for example, as I've fallen in love with my partner, and it is one of the things it's done. It's done many things, right? It's been about building Palestinian family at a time of our vanishing, right? And that has been a whole different set of has brought a whole different set of struggles and incredible beauty. But also what how it connects to grief is that I've realized how I can I think you talk about you can only grieve as deep as you love,
Mhm.
right? And I think part of that is connected to um, the way I love changes when I grieve, and the way I
Yes.
grieve changes when I love,
Yes.
right? So I notice that what starts to happen is I have different capacities to be present to myself, to my children, to my community, to my people, to my own body when am able to practice a love that makes grief able to wash a change over part of over and over again, I would say, because every day it's this daily grief, right? It's like what Mahmoud
Yeah.
Darwish talks about as ordinary grief, or the ordinary grief. So we need ordinary love. We need daily love. We need the love that is able to remind us that there's something undying here that is in a different time, right? It goes back to the timepiece. So yeah, so I think that's the thing I would I think that's important to remind ourselves that our love practices are always connected to our grief practices. And so sometimes when we're unable to um, feel something because of the intensity of the situation, sometimes it's because we love so deeply, right? And what we need is actually to make sure we're being loved on to be ready to really do the grieving work we need to grieve. um, but I'll say that and I'll end with a poem. I don't know if you want to comment on that before I read a poem.
When you told me that you were falling in love, like last year,
Mhm.
I think you were like, I'm falling head over heels in love. And it's
Yeah.
wild. And it gave me permission. I've also been falling in love this year.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, I
Mabruk.
love, thank
Congratulations.
you. I mean, but
Yes.
it's been different. I'm in poly love
Hmm.
and I've
Mm.
been exploring like how much structure of love do I need in order to hold the amount of grief I've got? And,
Yes.
it's a lot actually,
That's
right?
right. That's
I
right.
have a lot of relationships now where I don't say that much in the relationship, but I
Mm.
weep a lot and I'm held a lot. And then I
Mm.
don't know how to
Hmm.
explain that grief. It's just like I need to be able to just grieve and be held in it. And I keep wanting that for everyone. Like, whether you
Hmm.
call it romantic love, platonic love, familial love, whatever it is, to have more space to be like, don't just let the thing keep building up and building up and building up in you. It calcifies, you know?
Hmm.
I think that the grief is meant to be a flowing thing. It's like supposed to move through us, not become us.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
I feel like love allows that continuous motion of the thing to be like, oh, it also makes me much braver day to day, moment by moment. There's a sense of I think I grew up with a sense of like I'm gonna go old. I'm gonna grow old, and we're all gonna grow old, and it's
Hmm.
weird if we don't. And now I feel differently, which is I'm like we're in an apocalyptic
Hmm.
increase or apocalyptic escalation where people I met at a bookstore a few weeks ago. are gone because of a mudslide in Asheville, and people that I
mm,
was following online and been learning from for the past year are gone because they got shot
mm,
in
mhm,
Palestine on the street.
mhm, mhm,
You can't assume any longevity. And so then the present becomes so much more important, that I need to love you right now, and I need to
mhm,
be in solidarity with you, and I need to be open and honest. Like I just need to do whatever I'm going to do love wise now.
mhm.
Right.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
each day I have to be like, all the grief, all the love, bring it on. Like I
That's
remember
right.
Audre Lorde said, go out like a meteor, but I'm like every
Yes,
day, right? I'm just like,
yes.
live it all the way. So I
Mm,
think that I feel, but that felt like such a gift from you
mm,
when you, when you're just sort of like, I'm a Palestinian and I'm falling in love. I was
mhm,
like, that should be
mhm.
the title of a book. That should be, like there you go, right?
Uh,
Because and I've been speaking again. I have several Palestinians that I'm very close to in my life, and many of them have been going through these massive transformations and openings
mhm,
of love towards love.
mhm, mhm.
So yeah, I think
Be-
there's not an accident there. It's like it's the medicine.
It's the medicine, and it's also because life takes its power from love,
Yes,
right? Like, so it's like
we're
we
all here
need,
because
we,
someone loved us.
yeah, exactly. So we need that power right now more than ever.
I agree.
Um, that's connected to the survival piece at the end of the world. I think this is where love actually shows up in a way for us that it was always there, but we didn't see it. And now we're forced to see it. Like that's how I think I've experienced it in many ways. And I experienced it by looking in the eyes of my lover, that's like the
Yeah.
concrete. Like there's some concrete
Yeah.
stuff about it. But then you start to realize that it's also it's a way home. It's a way home to where we've been
It's a way
needing to
home. And
go.
like you said, Palestinians have survived many endings of the world. I also keep
Mm-hmm.
thinking about that I'm like, there's so much about what we're living in that has to end, and we actually need it. We want it to end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a colonial imperial world that we want to end. But the
Mm-hmm.
people, we want to survive and move through it to this other place where we don't have to be in these borders that are unnatural and that keep us from thinking as earthlings and thinking as survivors, people who are going to move forward. And yeah, so I feel like that love is like the little portal.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yes. Well, actually, that's funny you say that because I'll end with this poem, and
Okay,
it's
great.
called "Grief is a Portal."
uh, Great. Okay,
Yes.
great.
Okay, so you already know. Grief is a portal. I reject the night. I reject the night. Night is not night. Night is still illumination, only by distant stars. Sometimes by martyrs in moonlight. I reject the night. I reject this poem. Ya Rab, give me a word that can snatch life from this life. Grief is a portal. I do not exist except inside that which I love. Life inside life is a prayer, a homeland where smoke and hope don't always rise. Sometimes we fall, like a corpse pushed off the rooftop, like Tulkarm inside a torture camp, like Gaza inside Jenin, life inside life, rise inside fall. Love me like I love me, like I grieve. Grieve what I grieve, because death inside death will never put an end to genocide. Only grief is a portal.